Hi, welcome to day 8 of the Accelerator Program. Now, today we're going to talk about one of the most pervasive yet hidden mechanisms by which you continue to have mental health problems, but anxiety, panic, worry. So today we're going to talk about the stories that you tell yourself, the catastrophic stories that you tell yourself. But first, a bit of background, okay? Everything that you see on the TV is a story. Now you might go, well, no, I watch the news, that's not a story. It is, because every news segment is a story. It has a context, it has like a sense of movement and progress, and it's got like a conclusion, right? We'll see what happens tomorrow. Everything that happens on TV is a story, and we can't resist stories because we create stories ourselves all the time. We story our life. Everything we do is a story. Silly example. I made a chicken casserole the other day, and I thought to myself, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll make it a bit bigger, and then we can have it, I can have it for lunch the next day. That's a story. I'm saying I'm doing this, but I'm planning to make it a bit bigger because then I can have it the next day. And I've heard people, when I'm out shopping, I hear people, a woman was talking to her daughter, she says, if you get the red one, you can wear that with the white pants, you can wear it with the black pants, and also you could wear a skirt that was, it's a story. If you do this, this is what you can do with it, this is what might happen. We're not, well, I'm not the only person who recognizes the power of stories, right? So, for 20 years before Brexit, Boris was feeding stories of EU dysfunction into the media, making up stories about straight bananas and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And then, of course, during the Brexit campaign, he's telling us all sorts of stories, many of which turn out to be untrue. In North Korea, the great leader keeps feeding the population stories about how fantastic it is to be a North Korean and how fantastic the great leader is, and because they don't have any alternatives, it's really hard to find alternatives, they believe these stories. Putin tells the story of he's saving Russia by invading Ukraine because Ukraine are baddies and we are goodies, and we are protecting ourselves by starting a war. Trump tells the story of the election being stolen from him, so it's not that he failed, it's that the powers that be, the kind of nefarious sort of underbelly people who control the world, stole it from him. And the whole QAnon thing is a bunch of stories, really. ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they tell stories. If you die as a martyr, which basically means if you die doing what you tell you to do, you go to heaven, etc., etc. And an old mentor of mine, Professor Pratushka Clarkson, who's sadly died, but she once said to me, the only thing people will sacrifice themselves for is a story. And I think that's absolutely true. We're fighting for the country, we're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for democracy. These are stories. So, stories are extremely powerful. Now, this brings us to the question, what stories do you tell yourself? Well, I'm prepared to bet that you tell yourself catastrophic stories that justify your symptoms. Catastrophic stories that justify your symptoms. I can't go to the supermarket because I might have a panic attack and people will see that I'm having a panic attack and I'll feel terribly embarrassed. That is a story that justifies your avoidance. I'm lonely. I don't think people like me. I'd like to have more friends, but there's no point because people don't like me, so I can't go to societies or clubs. I can't join in because there's no point. That's a story that justifies a symptom of loneliness. There's no point in doing anything because I don't enjoy it. That's a story that catastrophizes depression. Don't do it, I won't enjoy it. I couldn't do anything creative because I'm not very good at it and people will laugh at me. People will think it's useless. That's a story that justifies inactivity and expressing yourself. I can't fly, and I know people who can't fly. I can't fly because I'm frightened that the airplane will crash and I'll get killed. That's a story that justifies the symptom of avoiding traveling by airplane. I can't drive because I couldn't bear it if I had a crash. I know people who can't drive. Not ones that have been in therapy with me, however. So, we story every bit of our experience. It's all a story. And we tell ourselves catastrophic stories that justify our symptoms. What if I'm left alone at home and something happens? I won't be able to cope. I won't know what to do. So you can't leave me alone. Justifies the symptom of dependence. You will have your own story. You will have your own stories, and of course there are stories on the Facebook Mental Health Wizard Facebook group that are stories that justify the symptoms. So what I want you to do today is I want you to recognize that you can do the homeworks. I am safer than I feel I am, the stop exercise. But if you continue to tell yourself stories that justify your symptoms, then we're kind of like battling against the process. Remember, problems exist and persist if you don't have an alternative. If you persist in telling yourself stories that put you down, I'm not very clever, so I don't like to have conversations with people who I think might be cleverer than me because they'll think I'm stupid and I'll feel bad. That's a story that justifies avoidance. If you keep telling yourself these stories, you are always limiting your life. You're having a smaller life than you need to do, and you're justifying that by the stories you tell yourself. And the stories are catastrophic. So, this is your homework. What catastrophic story do you tell yourself the most? What catastrophic story do you tell yourself the most to justify your symptoms? Write it down on the Facebook Mental Health Wizard Facebook group, right? Let's take ownership over the catastrophic stories that we use to justify our symptoms. Because bear in mind, justifying your symptoms basically means I have to stay stuck. There's nothing I can do. The story I tell myself tells me there's nothing I can do, therefore I have to stay stuck. But you don't have to stay stuck. But if you tell yourself the story that you have to stay stuck, well then you have to stay stuck. So we've got to own our story, we've got to recognize it, we've got to challenge it. Do I actually need to stay stuck? Do I need to tell myself this catastrophic story? Or is it just a habit because it's the way I do it? I've done it for a while and it's just what I do. Okay? So, tomorrow we're going to be talking about choice, and I hope I'm not going to blow your mind tomorrow, because I'm going to start the conversation about power and control, but I'm going to start it from a point of recognizing that you actually have more choice than you really kind of think you do. So, recognize the stories you tell yourself. Write one catastrophic story on the Mental Health Wizard Facebook group, and start to think about the narrative that goes on in here that justifies keeping you stuck and keeping the symptoms in place. And let's take some ownership over that. So thank you for joining me for day 8. Tomorrow, day 9, we'll be looking at you have more choice than you believe you do.